By the time the vice principal asked him to empty his pockets in front of the scholarship committee, everyone in the gym had already decided what kind of man he was. Not angry, not dangerous, just pathetic. That was the expression on their faces as they watched Raymond Cole stand beside his maintenance card under the blue and silver fundraiser banners. Disappointment. The cold, superior kind people wear when they think they have found the one person in the room they're allowed to despise. For 24 years, Raymond had opened North Hollow High before sunrise, fixed broken toilets, unclogged drains, changed dead bulbs, repaired loose stage lights, salted icy steps, and cleaned up every mess nobody else wanted to touch. Most students barely noticed him. Some called him Mr. Ray and smiled. Most adults treated him like part of the building, useful only when something stopped working. That Friday night, the school gym was full of parents, teachers, business sponsors, and seniors in pressed clothes, all there for the annual Hope Fund banquet. They had spent a month raising money for scholarships for students whose families could not afford tuition deposits, books, and first semester fees. Raymond had helped unload chairs at dawn, repair the sound system at noon, and tape extension cords safely along the back wall before dinner. He had seen the donation envelopes counted. He had watched Melissa Voss, head of the parent committee, lock the cash inside a black metal box. He had watched Principal Garner carry that box into the administration office before the doors opened. At 8:30, someone said the box was gone. At 8-30-5, someone else said Raymond had been seen near the office. At 8:40, Vice Principal Kessler asked him to come quietly. At 8:50, Principal Garner held up the half-open cash box in a side office and said, in a voice meant to sound fair, "Raymond, do you want to explain this before it gets worse?" Raymond looked at the box, then at the faces around him. Garner, Kessler, Melissa Voss, 2 members of the committee. None of them looked shocked. They looked relieved. "Explain what?" he asked. Melissa folded her arms. "The scholarship money, nearly $13,000, is missing." Raymond kept his eyes on hers. "You think I took it?" Nobody answered quickly. That pause told him everything. Garner nodded toward Raymond's cart. "Then, explain the cash we found in your trash bag." Inside the rolled liner on the top shelf sat a bundle of bills wrapped in a torn fundraiser flyer. Not the full amount, just enough to make the accusation feel comfortable. Raymond stared at it for one long second. He did not look guilty. He looked like a man recognizing the exact shape of a trap after it had already closed around him. If this already makes your blood boil, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, how quickly do people decide what someone is worth, based only on the job they do? Melissa took a small step backward, as though his silence itself was evidence. "I knew something felt off." Raymond turned to her. "No," he said quietly. "You wanted something to feel off?" Garner's voice sharpened. "That's enough." Raymond looked back at him. 24 years in this building. And that's all it takes. School security walked him across the gym 10 minutes later. No handcuffs, no police. Just humiliation carried out politely enough that the school could still call itself respectable. Parents whispered. Students stared. A football player laughed under his breath. A chemistry teacher, who had borrowed Raymond's ladder 20 times, looked away instead of meeting his eyes. Near the Raphael table stood Lena Mercer, editor of the student paper and one of the few people in the room whose expression did not match the rest. She watched Raymond being escorted out, then looked at her father, Principal Garner, and saw something she trusted more than words. Panic hidden under authority. "What happened?" she asked. "Not now," Garner snapped. That answer convinced her something was wrong faster than any explanation could have. By 10:30, the school sent an email to parents about an internal incident involving fundraiser funds and confirmed that appropriate personnel action had been taken. Raymond had not yet seen a police officer. Nobody had asked him for a timeline. Nobody had reviewed all the cameras, but the school had already chosen its villain. Raymond went home to his apartment above a hardware store 3 blocks away. He lived alone. His wife had died 8 years earlier. His daughter called on Sundays unless work ran late. Most evenings, silence got there before he did. He took off his shoes, sat at the kitchen table, and wrote down everything he could remember before memory had time to get bullied by other people's version of events. He wrote the time he saw Melissa count the envelopes. He wrote that Garner placed the office key back in his desk. He wrote the exact order of the people in the room when they showed him the planted money. He wrote the sentence Melissa used. I knew something felt off. He had learned long ago that when powerful people start telling a story, small people survive by remembering better than everyone else. By Saturday morning, the town had already started decorating the lie. On social media, strangers called him greedy. Parents wrote that they had always had a weird feeling about him. Former students invented memories that made them feel clever in hindsight. None of it was true. All of it was useful. Lena spent most of that morning reading those comments and feeling sick. The worst part was not that people believed he had stolen the money. It was how happy they seemed to have found someone so easy to blame. That afternoon, she went to the media lab and found her friend, Jonah Park, who ran the student video announcements and knew more about the school's camera system than most staff members. I need a favor, she said. He looked up from his editing screen. What kind of favor? The kind that gets us in trouble if we're right. An hour later, they were inside the AV office, logged into the archived security system under an old administrative account. Jonah swore still worked, only because the district was lazy. They pulled the Friday timeline. Main hall. Administration corridor. Gym entrance. Loading dock. At first everything matched the official story just enough to feel dangerous. Raymond passed the administration wing at 8:21 with his cart. Melissa crossed that hall 2 minutes later. Garner entered his office at 8:24. Then Jonah paused the footage. The timestamp jumps, he said. Lena leaned closer. He was right. The corridor feed moved from 8 hours 24 minutes and 11 seconds to 8 hours 24 minutes and 28 seconds without the blur of a normal glitch. 17 seconds gone, neatly cut. They opened a second angle from farther down the same hall. Grainier, wider, but still usable. At 8:24, a figure stepped into view, carrying a dark backpack. The video jumped. When it resumed, the figure was gone. Zoom, Lena whispered. Jonah did. The image broke into pixels, but not enough to hide the face. Trevor, boss, Melissa's 19-year-old son. He drifted around school events whenever his mother needed help, which usually meant standing near adults, until someone handed him a simple job and thanked him too much for doing it badly. Lena remembered something else. 2 months earlier, Trevor had bragged in this very room that school security was held together with duct tape and old passwords. Back then, people laughed. Now nobody was laughing. They opened the loading dock camera. At 8:27, Trevor came out the side door, moving quickly, backpack over one shoulder. At the bottom of the steps, the zipper slipped. A white donation envelope slid halfway out. Trevor shoved it back in and kept going without looking around. Lena sat back so hard her chair hit the cabinet behind her. That's him, Jonah said. No, Lena replied, suddenly colder. That's enough to start a fight. I want enough to finish one. So they kept digging. The volunteer room system log showed an admin login at 8:23, seconds before the missing footage. The account belonged to the parent committee event terminal. Not Raymond. Not maintenance. Not random chance. The banquet room camera showed Trevor near the silent auction tables 20 minutes before the theft, wearing the same backpack. The gym exit camera showed him leaving the building briefly at 8:29 and returning 5 minutes later without it. Lena printed everything. Then she went to see Raymond. He opened the door in socks and a faded green sweater, looking tired but far less broken than she expected. You don't believe it, he said before she spoke. Lena stepped inside. No. And I think I know why they needed everyone else, too. She spread the stills across his kitchen table. Trevor in the hall. Trevor at the dock. The edited timestamp. The login record. Raymond studied each page in silence. Finally, he said, they didn't need proof. They needed comfort. Lena frowned. What do you mean? He tapped a photo of the money found on his cart. The second they saw cash next to my supplies, they relaxed. Not because they knew the truth, because they thought they recognized the kind of man who would make their problems simple. That stayed with her. By Monday, the district announced a special school board meeting for Thursday night. Officially, it was to discuss the fundraiser theft and reassure families. Unofficially, it was meant to contain damage before anyone started asking why a man had been disgraced before the evidence had even been properly reviewed. Lena decided she was done waiting for adults to save themselves from their own cowardice. Her mother begged her not to get involved. Jonah warned her that if they were wrong, they would be finished. One teacher quietly suggested she think about college recommendations before publicly embarrassing the principal. Lena thanked them all and kept working. On Thursday evening, the boardroom was packed. Parents lined the back wall. Teachers sat stiffly in folding chairs. Students came because a public collapse is still entertainment when you are 17, and believe you are only watching history, not participating in it. Raymond sat in the last row in a clean blue shirt, hands folded, face unreadable. Melissa Voss arrived in cream wool and arranged sorrow. Principal Garner looked as if he had not slept. When the board chair opened the floor for comments, Lena stepped to the microphone before anyone else could claim the air. "My name is Lena Mercer," she said. "I'm a senior at North Hollow High, and I'm here because this school publicly blamed a man before it had finished checking its own evidence." A murmur moved through the room. Garner stewed. "Lena, this is not appropriate." She did not look at him. It became appropriate the moment you escorted an innocent man through a gym full of people and called it procedure. Jonah connected the projector. The first video appeared on the wall behind her. The administration corridor. The time stump. Raymond passing through. Melissa crossing later. Garner entering the office. Dente jumped the room, leaned forward. Lena's voice stayed calm. This section of security footage was altered. We compared multiple archive angles. This was not a glitch. Garner's face emptied. Melissa's did something worse. It tightened, like a person realizing she had run out of places to stand. The second clip played Trevor in the hall with the backpack before the cut. The third showed him leaving the side door, donation envelope slipping from the bag before he shoved it back inside. Nobody in the room needed anything explained after that. Melissa rose halfway to her feet. "This proves nothing." Lena held up the printed system log. "Then maybe this helps." The camera feed was accessed from the parent committee terminal 1 minute before the cut. All heads turned toward Melissa. The board chair looked at Garner. Was any of this reviewed before staff action was taken? Garner opened his mouth and failed to fill the silence. Then Raymond stood. He did not hurry to the microphone. He walked there with the calm of a man who had already lost what mattered and no longer needed permission to say the truth aloud. "I worked in that building for 24 years. He said, "and not one person in authority asked me a real question before they decided I fit the story they needed." Nobody interrupted him. "I fixed your leaks, unlocked your doors, cleaned your hallways, helped your children when they threw up before exams and cried after breakups in stairwells. But the second money went missing, none of that mattered." He looked around the room. "Because to people like you, I was still the easiest man in the building to blame." Silence spread across the boardroom like shame made physical. By the next afternoon, Trevor had confessed. He took the money because he was desperate, stupid, and arrogant enough to believe he could plant a small amount on Raymond's cart and let class prejudice do the rest. He said it almost exactly that way too, though with less self. Melissa had not stolen the money herself, but she knew almost immediately what had happened. And for one ugly hour she chose to say nothing because letting suspicion settle on Raymond looked easier than letting her son's life explode in public. That silence finished her. She resigned by the end of the week. Garner kept his job only after a district reprimand, a formal review, and a public apology so strained it sounded like a man choking on each sentence as it left him. The school board offered Raymond his job back on Monday. They called him loyal, steady, a valued member of the North Hollow family. Raymond listened, ten aside. "No." Garner blinked. "No." Raymond looked at him steadily. "You don't get to drag me through public disgrace and then hand me back a mop like that settles the debt." No one in the room had an answer for that. 2 months later, a middle school across town hired him as head of maintenance after hearing what had happened and, more importantly, hearing how he had carried himself through it. He took that job. Not because it paid more, because the halls there did not remember his humiliation. Lena wrote the story for the student paper herself. She did not title it The Fundraiser Incident. She called it the easiest man to blame. The article spread beyond the town. Parents shared it. Alumni wrote angry messages. A local newspaper reprinted parts of it, and in the middle of all that noise, the ugliest truth remained the simplest one. People had been ready to believe the wrong man because he looked like the kind of man they were trained to suspect. Months later, Lena visited Raymond in the basement mechanical room of the middle school on the last day before winter break. He was tightening a valve with music playing softly from an old radio. "You look better here," she said. He smiled without turning around. "That's because nobody here tried to ruin my life between second period and lunch." She laughed. Then she asked the question that had stayed with her since the board meeting. "When did you know they'd turn that fast?" Raymond straightened and wiped his hands on a rag. "The second they found that money on my cart," he said. "Because of what it looked like." He shook his head. Because of how relieved they looked. That answer stayed with her longer than the footage, the confession, or the apology ever did. Because he was right. The ugliest part had never been the theft. It had been the relief, the comfort people felt once they had found someone low enough to carry their suspicion for them. If this story stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what was worse, the theft itself, or how easily everyone believed the wrong man did it.